Good afternoon, Colonel Cameron. Good afternoon, Detachment 905. I'm Cadet Nye, and today we'll be partaking in a United States Air Force Academy Soaring School virtual demonstration to learn more about the program and the potential for our RTC cadets. We will be recording this event to archive it for the detachment, as not everyone who wanted to attend could make it at this time. We are joined today by Lieutenant Colonel Cameron, an instructor in the United States Air Force Academy Soaring School, Cadet Instructor Pilot Jack Schultz, Cadet Instructor Pilot, or correction please, Cadet Lizzie Warner, a student instructor upgrade, and Cadet Instructor Rachel Eberhardt. So they'll be walking us through this event. We will be watching a daily brief, pre-flight brief, pre-flight inspection, takeoff, mid-flight, and landing footage, post-flight brief, and answering any questions along the way. With that being said, Colonel Cameron, Cadet Instructors, thank you for meeting with us. And if you would like to talk a bit about the program, now would be the time.
Hi, everyone. Did you want to say anything? Okay.
Hey, Cadet Nye. I'm going to actually just let the cadets talk to you guys because they run everything here at the airfield and they are your exact ages. And so this is a leadership lab that we have at the Air Force Academy. And I just want you to see that your exact age kids are not kids, young adults are running all the airfield operations. All right, take it over.
Thanks, Colonel Cameron. So yeah, we're at the airfield, the 94th Squadron at USAFA, and Jack and I teach the upgrade class for one of our days, and Lizzie's part of our day. We're just going to walk through kind of our process that every student and Cadet IP walks through and flies every day here at the airfield.
Fantastic. So how this is going to work is we are going to watch a video, we're going to pause it, and then we're going to go to our guests who will speak a bit on it, and then ask any questions along the way. For anyone in Zoom, what I want you to do is just type in a question and I will ask it formally and get it answered. Furthermore, if you have any general questions, we can say that till the end, provided that we have enough time. Without further ado, let's take a look at the Soaring School virtual demonstration.
Alright, let's get our brief for today. Welcome back, studs. Welcome back, IPs. Sledges. Shotgun GK, normally you got 2 questions.
Want to choose someone?
Yeah, choose whoever you want.
Alright. Let's see what we got here. Alex, what is the altitude of runway 26? 6,700. Negative. Do you know where to find it? Where else? Ball 3. Alright, does anyone know it?
6759?
No.
6'5", yeah, like 5.
No.
6572.
Whoa! Alright. Aaron, if I have uncommanded air brake deployment at 95 knots, do I need to declare an emergency? Or more than that, do I need to perform a structural damage to shield lift?
No.
Why?
It's not above
D&E?
yeah.
Sweet. Don't do SRS, don't do SRS, or on SRS, and then here notes, nothing new. First takeoff's gonna be as soon as possible, so 12:30, and then last land. Sorry, that must have just gotten cut off, but it's gonna be 1800. So our last land's gonna be 1800. We're not flying to sunset anymore. Cool. Cool, so we're gonna, for Autumn, we're gonna Colonel Cameron, get Captain Major Ducola, those would be Lieutenant Bachman to Lieutenant Kushat, Marshler, Drood, Jaden, Logger is going to be Aiden, Hanger Boss Matt, and then Chainsaw to do it, and then Whip also is going to be Jaden. Pretty good slide, please. Nothing new for SIIs, nothing's changed, so you all should know our 3 SIIs currently. Yeah. No new NOTAMs, no TFRs for today. We're gonna have 10 sailplanes, 5 tows. This is for USA. 02's currently getting maintenance. Maintenance is working on it. So we might activate the spare. Just keep an ear out for that. Pair is not active today because it's Monday. Power is active, and then UAS is active. Cool. Today's just gonna be a south flow day. Pretty light winds. I think they're around like 8 to 10 knots right now, so nothing too major. Should be a very beautiful day. Weather, I know that it should start. There should be precip later on in the day, correct?
Potential for some clouds and precip. It's isolated, so we're gonna hope that it stays clear. Weather thinks that we can fly till the end of our fly period at 1800.
Awesome. Alrighty.
So no new ops notes. I do want to just piggyback real quick. Did somebody already take over for the logger from this morning for Bella? Can I have somebody go take over for her? Because I know she has to get on that bus. All right, status unrestricted, SCO number 3. And we have a new SCO up there. It's with Second Lieutenant Bachman, so he may change that SCO number. It was for UAS, wind chill, and Howard. Thanks. So anticipate if the wind chill drops out, then it will probably still remain 3 for number of sailplanes. Okay. Runway in use 16, bird watch condition low, no 210s. No DV visits, construction continues, you guys know about that. No other special operations or airfield advisories.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome. Students, you have any questions, comments, concerns? Please. Officers, sweet. Phrase of the week is fly good, don't suck. So, remember to go get dispatch, go get pumped up. Everyone ready? Ready? Woo!
All right. So I'm gonna try to, if you could speak a little bit more to just the opening daily brief and what exactly you're trying to gain out of that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so that's just our daily OPSUP brief. OPSUP stands for Operation Supervisor. But basically, that's just all of the IPs and students getting on the same page and understanding like what we're going to be not doing throughout the day, because we kind of do the same thing every day. But yeah, it helps you with your situational awareness. That's right. Thanks, Rachel. Of just you knowing what's going on throughout the day. So they'll tell you about the weather. They'll tell you about any new anything that's going on. So for example, if there's she talked about the construction, which we have. If say there was snow on the ground and we can't use a certain runway, stuff like that, we learn all that during the brief. And then at the end, you need that brief to fly. And then at the end, that's when we all clap, we go out, we brief up, do the our pre-flight brief, and then we go out and fly. If that makes sense. No super surface level, but so yeah, throw some questions at me.
Yeah. Well, right off the back, something that I had when I watched the video was there was Para, UAS, and I believe Howard were mentioned, and I believe those are separate. I don't want to branches in the United States Air Force Academy. Is there a frequent overlap with those programs? Like, is that always a problem scheduling?
It's not a problem scheduling, but Para, which is the parachute, that's the jump program we have, and then Powered is just actual flying planes around. They all fly out of our same airfield, so we don't have to kind of deconflict scheduling with them. But there's certain airspaces that we have to be aware about when both Para and Powered are active. And then UAS, there's another airspace. They're not here at our airfield, but they're over closer to where the actual academy is.
Fascinating. Well, now I'm going to open it up for questions. If anyone on Zoom has any questions, feel free to type it out or unmute and speak up. All right. Doesn't look like there's any questions for that. So now we can move on to our second segment, the pre-flight brief. Wind it a little bit.
Ice Lake and then cul-de-sac again. Excuse me, not cul-de-sac, the throughway intersection north below. It's going to be a normal pattern, extended base pattern, normal pattern, and then pattern for intentional pattern rubber for intentional. Clearing, we're obviously going to use the clock system, low level, high, factor, non-factor communications. Keep in mind we're a crew, so even though I am instructing you, if we get to the point where we have to work together, we will do so. Transfer aircraft control, obviously shake and take, physiological incident, just let me know if you're feeling anything, I will also let you know, which would be kind of unfortunate. Emergency procedures, crew responsibilities, if, stuff hits the fan, I'll take control and we'll land as soon as conditions permit. Ground egress, you obviously know to open the canopy, step out, go towards the upper wing, egress, all that fun jazz you learned in August. Altitude rope break, something I always do. Have we flown together before?
No.
Okay, cool. Something I always do is I'll call out 50, 100, 150, 200. Always. You don't have to repeat it if you don't want to. I'll just say 50 feet, and you can say 50 feet. I don't really care. It just it's good for peace of mind. Force landing procedures. We're in the North Flow, so there's actually a lot of good open fields out there, and a lot of emergency landing fields out, like Hill Club and all that.
Yeah.
Recovery bailout procedures, 2,000 feet to initiate it, which honestly, you can go a little lower than that, but that's what's published. Contact soft/go if time and conditions permit. Let's go to the EP of the day real quick. Today is the 18th day of March. Inadvertent flight into AMC. This one's exciting. Let's kind of put aside checklists here. Let's say you're solo or you're with a kid who's just scared out of his mind and you can't access those zebra pages. If you fly into IMC, which means cloud, if you will, what do you do?
So you want to get out of it as soon as possible?
Sure, how do you do that?
Just use air brakes to lower yourself out.
You can use air brakes, and then in your checklist procedures, it will tell you, just conceptually, turn 180 degrees.
Just get away from, go back to where you were, because it's a safe area.
Here, the biggest thing I can tell you, just know where the mountains are. Know where the mountains are, and turn the other way. Okay? Literally, just know where the mountains, because that's your biggest limiting factor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
No questions.
All right, and that concludes the pre-flight brief. Instructors could talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that one. So that brief, after we've had our op suit brief for the day, you go find the IP. I'm a student right now going through the upgrade. I'll go find the IP that I was scheduled to fly with. And we brief up for the individual flights that we're going to do. So part of that brief can include where you're going to be flying, which one of our areas we're going to be flying in, what maneuvers we want to accomplish that day. It includes looking at my grade card and making sure that we're getting the things done that I need to, advance through the syllabus, as well as making sure that my IP knows what I need to focus on instruction-wise. You also go through other things that are always going to be the same in that brief, like talking about whether you had the op suit brief for the day, whether you're pucked up, which is in our system, making sure that we're ready and able to fly, making sure that you're on the same page about emergency procedures and how we're going to handle that. And then that brief ends every day with an example emergency procedure just to talk through. So that one, the example emergency was flying into IMC or clouds, weather, something like that, where you can't see what's going on. And the student and the IP have an opportunity to talk about how they'd handle that. And the IP can kind of see what the student's thinking is like and how they're about to approach this flight.
I see. So with that being said, a question that I had was, so the cadet on the left there, that is effectively what we have in ROTC is we have something called a POC and a GMC. A POC is a senior throughout the program. Like after sophomore year, you go into field training, then you're a POC. So is the cadet on the left similar to a POC and the one on the right is a GMC, as that's instructor pilot and the other is a pilot?
Yes, so the one on the left is the instructor pilot. They've already gone through the entire upgrade program, which can take a little under a year. They're qualified to both fly and instruct in the plane. That student on the right is going through the upgrade program, learning how to both fly the gliders that we fly here and then learning how to instruct those. So the student on the left, or the IP on the left, is guiding that brief and also asking questions to kind of test the students' knowledge, their situational awareness, and just get them thinking about the flight.
Great. And IP does stand for instructor pilot, correct?
Yes, instructor pilot.
All right. All right, if there's any questions, feel free to zoom out or talk up. All right, from Cadet Nelson, what is the training / qualifications for a cadet to become an IP?
So after taking our basic soaring program called 251 during your freshman year, that first summer, after your freshman year at the academy, you're able to apply for 461, which is the program to then become an instructor pilot. People are then selected from all of the applicants and you start the upgrade program. That upgrade program has 4 phases. The first one is getting the student to be able to solo the plane. The second one is mastery in flying the front seat of the aircraft. The third phase is mastery in flying in the rear seat of the aircraft. And then the fourth phase is mastery and actually learning how to instruct with a student in the plane. So we have our instructors who are qualified pretend to be students to let the students practice instructing. So you have to progress all the way through the syllabus. There's a phase check halfway through and then a check ride at the end where officers are grading you on your ability to both fly and instruct. And after passing through all of that, you're able to become an instructor pilot.
And continue on that, does the IP rating transfer to any kind of civilian rating?
No, it doesn't.
You can transfer your glider hours to apply for like a civilian glider pilot's license, but there's specific like solo time hours that we don't necessarily acquire during our upgrade program or the initial program, but it's possible to gain those hours and get the gliders PPL basically.
Questions? All right. There we have it. All right. So if there are no further questions, we can move on to the next segment.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Questions?
Alright, so first off, we're checking the wheel well, making sure there's no cracks in it. Okay. Then we're looking down the wing to see if we can see any, is there any cracks? We're starting at the wing roof, look out building for any dents or cracks. Making sure the paint's lining up. Okay. Making sure that paint's lining up as well, making sure to keep stuff well clear. Okay. And we're gonna check inside. Make sure there's no water or objects in there. Okay. Keep filling down the wing root, or filling down the wings. Make sure this is flush. The wing pin. Right on. Make sure that the wing's not gonna come off. Spin the wheel. Now we're starting to feel for the tape. Make sure there's no separation in it. Okay. If we get here, making sure the aileron on the other side is moving symmetrical to this one. Sounds good. Looking for that tape. And then here we're counting the screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure that this is supposed to be a crescent moon. This one's pretty shallow, like not down there.
Yeah, and that was written up in the books, right?
Yeah.
One other thing we want to make sure we're checking is we have our mooring ring back here.
Oh yeah.
So just double check. I forget that one all the time. Got it. Make sure that it's tight.
Mooring ring is tight.
Cool. Got all this already.
Yep. Looking down the fuselage for any dents. Checking for any dents. We get here. Making sure they're clear.
Okay.
We got tape, the ballast, there's no ballast in there, and they wrote that up. Make sure that's flush.
Okay. How far out can we push on this?
6 inches.
Right on.
Then we're checking for tape down the side.
Okay.
Checking for tape up top. Checking for tape up here. We're good on all those.
Yeah. What are the kinds of tape we have?
We have gap tape, sealing tape, and circulator tape.
Okay. Which ones do we have to have to make sure we have them?
We have to have gap tape and circulator tape.
Good.
Sealing's just for the noise and performance.
Good. What about this box here? Is tape required?
Only when we have tail ballast.
Only tail ballast. Good.
Landing between.
Landing in between.
All right. So next up, we're checking the rudder. Make sure we put in 20 minutes. While we're doing that, checking for this pin and this pin. So the center pin's right there.
Okay.
I'll try to make sure there's nothing up here. Try checking the pressure of the elevator.
Yeah, but we also have tape on top too, right? So also show that zigzag in the gap.
Yep. All right. Coming over on this side, just checking, make sure the tape is still on this side too.
Good.
Yep. Make sure we have our sealing tape on the OMG probe. And then I like to give this a squeeze just because sometimes they're flat.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Good. And what type of tape we're filling on the bottom here?
Turbulator.
Turbulator tape, good.
Check for the pins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Checking the deflection on the other side, make sure they're symmetric. Make sure that pin is flush. It's fitting the wheel.
Okay.
I got it. Wing fitter's not gonna come off. Okay. Looking down for any dents again.
Yeah, we're also checking that our tires, inflated, no bald spots, things like that too.
We got both yaw strings.
Okay.
Checking the static ports for any debris. Make sure not to touch them.
Okay, good. Why don't we touch those?
Because our fingers have oils that'll clog it.
Okay, good.
Checking the front, the grain didn't clog that.
Okay.
Checking this static port. And I like to finish this by giving this a squeeze. That was good as well.
Awesome. Nice job.
Right? So if you guys could talk a little bit more on the pre-flight inspection, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, so the pre-flight is kind of I would say, one of our more crucial steps and important parts before we fly. You were watching the student kind of run through the exterior inspection, and he was kind of rattling off all the different numbers and like regulations and rules for each spot in the plane. And we have a document called -1 for our plane that details kind of the requirements that need to be met when you do the inspection. And we also have an interior inspection. It just wasn't filmed. It follows a similar process of like mandatory components that must be checked before you pull up to the line and take off. So we start on, I guess in this picture, you can see the canopy open. We start on this side of the plane and kind of make our way around the plane, checking all important parts and making sure that there's no discrepancies that could interfere with the actual flight itself and put us in a dangerous situation. But yeah, all the students start off kind of following the IP around the plane, learning like what they're checking for, and then eventually when they're in the pit stage or the final stage of their upgrade, they should be running both inspections themselves and be able to diligently and correctly like run through the inspection to ensure a safe flight for the crew.
Now, has there ever been a situation, well, I imagine there would be, but has there ever been a situation where a glider was just totally unfit to fly? And if so, what are the procedures for seeing to that?
So I'm sure there has been some pretty like egregious things found like on planes before while they're doing the inspection, but I know planes that have found like little pinholes like in the bottom of the wings that they find and they're like, okay, so we can't fly, or like something will be weird with the instruments on the inside of the plane. And we have a process. There's 6 different forms that we run like with the plane, but 2 of them we have 781 form that gets communicated to maintenance. So we have an entire maintenance team that runs 24 hours for the airfield. So if we ever find anything that needs to be fixed or checked on by maintenance, we just give them a call and write it up, and they ensure like the safety of flight or deem the plane like not flyable that day.
Hey, thank you. And so are there any elements to this glider? Well, I imagine there are, but like any elements that are unique to a glider in particular and not really found on any aircraft or anything of that nature?
So we do have a lot of, like, we kind of heard the student talking about it, but we have 3 different kinds of tape that run along the plane. And so basically like all of our control surfaces are dependent on a turbulator tape, which is just like kind of a thicker tape with like bumps along it to essentially like create our control surfaces, like ability to fly the plane while we're going. So, and then we have sealing tape, which runs around all of the seams of the plane, because we actually like do statics and demos all the time, and you learn how to disassemble and reassemble the plane. So this thing is like, take the screw out, pull the wing off. It's like super easy. It's so we have a lot of different tape kind of holding the plane together and giving it the ability to fly. So I think that's kind of unique, along with it just being a glider and no engine.
I got one more thing actually. We also have they talked about it in the brief. Yeah, sorry. We have this thing called a yaw string. So I don't know if you guys have flown many actual power planes, but to check coordination, normally there's a little instrument on the inside with like a bubble. And if the bubble is in between 2 lines, that means you're coordinated, which basically means you're flying straight through the air. For us, we don't have anything like that. So we literally just have a piece of Scotch tape and a little yarn string that just flaps back and forth. And then so if that's straight back, that's how we tell if we're coordinated or not. Yeah. Super simplistic. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, if there's any questions from the Zoom chat, please type them in or just speak them up. From Cadet Melson, was the student wearing a parachute?
Yeah, so in all of our flights, actually, when we were in upgrade, the parachutes weren't, and before that, they weren't mandatory yet. They, I guess, fairly recently have become mandatory, but essentially this plane has no other exit point in the air other than jumping out. Like if you were to get in an uncontrollable spin or like you weren't able to recover, you'd have to bail out. So we wear parachutes in the event of an emergency where you have to leave the plane in the air.
Yeah, and basically how you do that is there's two handles underneath the canopy. You just pull both of them, push the canopy off of you, and you just jump. So, yeah. It's nothing really that cool. There's no like ejection seat or anything.
It's not very fancy, but we
Set
hope
it.
for the best.
Yeah, you just set.
Yes, sir. And so those are the yaw strings, is that correct?
The yaw strings would be behind, so the IP is kind of blocking it. They're like on top of the canopy.
Yeah.
On the very tippy top of the canopy.
All right, if there's any further questions, please let it be known. All right, it looks like that has concluded, and so we will go to our next session, the takeoff footage.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right, so if you could describe exactly what it is that you're going through in terms of that takeoff process, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, okay. So you start off, it did show in that clip, but you run through your before takeoff checklist. And that just makes sure, again, that's another checklist to just make sure the plane's ready to fly. And then you're a guy that we call, or sorry, a person that we call a rope runner will run over and connect the rope that's connected to the tow plane to our nose. And then once that happens, we make a radio call to the tower asking for takeoff clearance. They'll give us clearance, and then we'll look over to the other guy that was holding the wing, and we'll give them a thumbs up, and they'll pick up the wing so that we're wings level. We have to do that because without any air like blowing across our control surfaces, we can't keep our wings level without someone there already, if that makes sense. And then the tow plane will pull out the slack, and then we will wag our rudders, and the wing runner will be looking at them. And once he sees that, he'll do this motion, just wag it, or what is this, a circle with your hand, I guess? I don't know. So the tow plane, signaling to the tow plane that everyone's ready to go. And then the tow plane will start its engine and take off. And then so once the tow plane's going inside the plane, we're using forward and back stick to just balance on our main wheel, and then left and right stick to keep our wings level again. and then using left and right rudder to stay right behind the tow plane. And then we're a little bit more efficient than the tow plane. So once we get up to about 45 knots-ish, if you're in a good position, you'll take off while the tow plane's still on the ground. So you have to kind of crab into the wind at that point, just to stay behind the tow plane. And then finally the tow plane will take off and you can just kind of get back into the good tow position.
And another part of the whole takeoff process that people don't initially kind of realize, we have a lot of kind of like counting and paperwork that goes into like our sortie count during the day. So we have to get logged into the system before we actually take off. So there's a person that works on the SPLA, like kind of the turf area that you're seeing, called the chainsaw, and they communicate to the logger. And each crew reports their numbers, so like their center of gravity numbers, who's going to be in the aircraft, and then our personal, like, or our crew overall risk management number. So we make all of those reporting numbers and get kind of logged into the system before we even take off, just to make sure that everyone's cleared to fly and good to go before they even get hooked up to the tow plane.
Interesting. And so with that, what are the qualifications of a tow plane pilot? Is it just like a cadet, or is it a proper instructor? What is the deal with that person?
No, most of them are just old ex-pilots that used to fly.
They're like old Air Force pilots.
Yeah, they're old retired Air Force pilots. I don't really know how you get that job, but I'm assuming there's some type of
I think they have a good time. I don't know how you get that
process,
gig, but
All right. And so with that, so does the tow plane ever leave the ground, or is it, because from what it sounds like, the glider can kind of take off without it properly leaving.
right. So, sorry, go ahead.
How often does the tow plane actually leave the ground then?
No, so the tow plane has to leave the ground. So we get pulled up from ground level to about 2,500 feet. So what'll happen is we take off first. What I was trying to get at was we take off first, and then for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds, we'll be off the ground when the tow plane's not off the ground, and then the tow plane will take off. And then at that point, you just fly formation with the tow plane to wherever you're trying to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it.
And then once we're in the where we need to be, there's a release handle on the inside, and you just pull that, and the rope falls away, the tow plane goes and lands, and then we just do our thing in the air.
I see. All right. So with that being said, we're opening up to questions. If you have a question, let it be known in chat or via unmuting and sounding off.
Hi, Cadet Guffey here. So I noticed that while they were doing the pre-flight inspection, they're wearing what looks like PTGs. Do you fly the glider in PTGs, or is it an OCPs or a flight suit thing? Like, what do you wear when you're flying?
so we have like 10 different uniforms that you could probably wear while flying. Obviously, like I'm wearing my flight suit today, but IPs, when you check, you have the opportunity, or you actually get provided like summers during the summer, which is just like a Nike t-shirt, like with our logo and like your name on it and your class year. So we have like IP gear, and then all of the students can wear, we call it PC gear, which is just like the PT uniforms. As a student, or your flight suit, you can also fly in OCPs. What else can you fly in? You can fly in, like the officers wear their own officer gear, which is pretty similar to IP like gear, which is basically just like sweatpants and a sweatshirt and like a coat. And like there's obviously limitations on like you can't fly with gloves or like a scarf, but like it's pretty versatile, and it's definitely nice to have a lot of different uniform options.
Yeah, it's pretty much anything except for blues. And then unless the commandant, who's like the general that runs the school, comes out, then you have to wear a flight suit, or you can't wear the sweats. But like it's pretty much any uniform we have.
Yeah, so no one ever attempts mess dress on a flight?
No.
I don't think that'd be very fun.
All right. Any more questions?
I have a quick follow-up. So I did get selected to come to source school over the summer. So I'll be down there for the second rotation, I believe. So I was just wondering,
I'll
what
be
the
here.
good thing to fly in is, so I can pack accordingly.
Oh, I would bring your like PT gear, like shorts and t-shirt.
And a lot of them, because
Like,
it gets hot, so.
Yeah, a
It's
lot,
sweaty and
a
gross.
lot of clothes, a lot of laundry detergent, a lot of sunscreen, a hat, sunglasses, tennis
I would,
shoes.
do you guys have flight suits? I would bring a flight suit just in
Yeah.
case.
Maybe.
But yeah, just your PT uniform.
Yeah.
Mostly.
RTC aren't assigned flight suits.
Okay, then
Okay,
don't bring them. Don't
yeah,
worry about
just
it.
your PT
You
gear,
don't
that would
need
be
it,
great.
yeah.
Outstanding.
Maybe
Alright.
the jacket and pants too, because it's
Yeah, it gets cold in the
morning.
morning a little bit, so.
How experienced are you with the concept of field training? You guys know, have you ever been there? Do you know what it's like essentially?
I think I know, it's kind of like a basic training type of deal, right? In between your sophomore and junior year.
Yes, it's focused more on leadership for RTC cadets. Just recently, they started getting USAPA cadets involved, but essentially, you're going to Alabama in the middle of summer. It's hot, boiling. How similar is that to the Air Force Academy?
I think
As
like
like
as
weather?
the soaring program or
Yeah,
like
what do you-
weather or BCT.
For weather primarily.
Oh, so one thing that people forget is we're a lot higher and way closer to the sun. So like if you're like just it doesn't matter, just bring sunscreen and it's gonna be hot. And then like at the airfield, there's no cover or like sometimes there's breeze and like it'll rain in the afternoon, but there's no cover out on the splat like where we all hang out before we fly. So it's just like brutal sun and like maybe one cloud every once in a while. So like it's gonna be hot.
But it's not as hot as Alabama.
Yeah, it's not
It's
humid
a
hot.
dry, it's
It's
a dry
dry.
heat.
And we do fly all day. So you'll be outside as early as 7 in the morning, into the evening. So during, peak afternoon hours, it is warm, but there were times in the summer where I'd start out in sweatpants and a sweatshirt. By midday, I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and then I'd want my sweatshirt again before we left. So it changes a lot throughout the day, especially during the summer. It's pretty cold in the mornings.
Outstanding. So if there are any more questions, speak up, let me know. In regard to takeoff, try to make sure that it's more focused on that. All right. In that case, we can go to the next segment. This is some flight footage that has been recorded. There's no music or sound with it, but to my knowledge, this is a bit of a more outdated model. Is that correct?
Yep. That's a new
Although,
one.
no, that's right. The tow plane looks a little different.
That's an old one.
Takeoff.
So that would kind of put the landing in with the in-flight footage just because they go over a lot of the same points. So if you could describe more what it feels like to kind of be up in the air and flying around, as well as what's going through your mind as you're landing, like what thought process is conducting in your brain.
Feels like when we're up there.
I always remember like my first flight of 251 and like my instructor pilot was like one of my buddies from my baby squad and like it was just super cool, but like you're like being towed, it's like kind of loud and like maybe a little bumpy and like you're kind of like, oh my god, I don't know what's going on. And then you like release and it just gets like so quiet and it's like peaceful and it's like you don't really understand the concept of like airspeed or like knots yet, but you just like kind of feel like kind of slow and you're like, as long as you're not in like 10 down, like you feel like you're pretty much just like floating around, like it's very like chill most of the time. So that's like what I remember from my first flight Like now I'm just kind of used to it.
But then you can also do, I mean, these glides are pretty sick. We can do, well, we can't, but you have to have special qualifications to do like flips and stuff. So when you're doing that, it's pretty much the opposite. It's like kind of crazy. You're pulling, I don't know, what's the limit? 4.5 G's. And then it's just really loud. It's kind of going crazy. But it's fun. The one thing I would say is it's very fun. No matter what you're doing, it's fun. And then when you're coming to land, it's kind of freaky because that's probably what I think is the most dangerous part about flying is because we don't have an engine, so we can't go around. So if you don't do it right, you just smash it on the ground, which, I mean, some of our classmates have smashed it on the ground. And they were fine, but they broke the plane and stuff like that. So yeah, it's when you're landing, you're really kind of focused and locked in because you don't want to be that guy, if that makes sense.
Do you have anything to add?
I was gonna say, I think one of the best descriptions one of my IPs described before a flight was that the entire length duration of the flight is like an inverse bell curve of like how stressful it is. So that takeoff there's a lot going on. You're trying to get everything perfect. And it's one of those critical phases of flight. So there's, I guess, a little bit more precision required in that, like there's with landing. And then aerotow, like Rachel said, it gets loud and it can be stressful if you can't stay directly behind the tow plane, especially with a new student or being the new student trying to figure that stuff out. But then you release and you have the altitude to practice maneuvers. You get to look around at USAFA and like the mountains. It's really pretty out here, just being that high up, getting to look at everything. And then you start to sequence back into land, and that's when everything starts to get a little bit more stressful. There's a little bit your tasks that you have to complete before landing start building up, whether it's like that pre-landing checklist or as you're actually coming in to land, making sure that you have a proper airspeed, making sure you're in center line. Learning that stuff as a new student can be difficult. So it's very variable throughout the flight, and it's a good learning experience no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, we're going to open it up for public questions. If you have any questions about in-flight procedures, any sort of questions about landing, please let me know. All right. Sounds good. In that case, we'll go on to the final little section, the post-flight briefing.
On takeoff, when we were going, I was off center line, right? And you prompted me multiple times, but I wasn't getting over at all. So it was stable, like we were talking about, and it was not specifically a dangerous situation, but it was the fact that you were telling me to do something, and as a student, I wasn't responding to you. So that should be telling you, hey, my student's not listening to me. So it's okay and it's safe to take that. If they're not within the standards that we're given, then you're okay to take that. Even if you feel like, oh man, I have control. It's not a terrible situation, but you can still take it. And it's good to take it because you have a new student who needs to learn what right looks like. And in that particular situation, right, it wasn't necessarily what right looks like. So you want to show that to them and make sure that they understand that, especially new students. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. But then we were talking about downwind on our second pattern to landing. So tell me what you thought I was doing wrong on the downwind.
So for a while we were parallel with the runway. Yeah. And there's a few ways of talking to a student about that. One is just watching the runway, or watching the SPLA and making sure you're parallel. But I know that like when I was a new student looking off to the right, I just start flying towards the right.
Yeah.
And when I was asking about your aim point, I didn't clarify that I was talking about what you were aiming at in the downwind and not what your aim point would be on final.
Yeah.
So I was trying to ask about using that plateau, like the left side of that plateau, as an aim point to stay parallel with the SPLA, but we didn't have enough time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Which is what I mentioned, like let's talk about it on the ground.
Yeah.
But it wasn't unsafe, and we were starting to turn towards base, so like you said, not mentioning that and then just talking to them about it on the ground could have caused less confusion in the air.
Yeah.
But we were straight in parallel with the SPLA for most of it, and then we just started to angle in, so our turn, rather than being like a 90-degree turn, was just kind of sloping into base.
Yeah. It's kind of going back to the whole, like, we talk about on the ground. One thing, sometimes with patterns are hard because they're so fast and everything happens so fast and you're thinking of 1,000 different things. So sometimes, even if you're like, hey, what is your aim point within your student? Sometimes it's better to just be more direct. Be like, see that plateau? Point your nose at it. Yeah, just make it very clear. And those are great things to like point out on the ground. So one thing I love to do with new students is to sit out on the spot and we watch the pattern and I'm like, okay, what are they doing now? And I have the student talk me through it and I have them point me at like the geographical things that helps them because I'm gonna get in the air some of those things come a little bit further to them.
Yeah. There's a little bit less time to ask questions
Right.
to get them to realize it, and I should have just been more directive early on.
Yeah, so it kind of helps them learn better and if they can say it on the ground confidently, then they'll more likely be able to say it in there. But if they're not able to say it on the ground, then you're going to have arms in the air. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, with that being said, if you could go over the exact specifications of what happens in a post-flight briefing, like what's the general guidelines that you're trying to get at when doing that action?
So the post-flight brief, that was mine from 2 days ago with my IP. I'd say generally post-flight briefs are to both understand everything that happened in the plane and during that flight, because like I mentioned, during that brief, there's not enough time to talk about it in the air. Everything's happening very quickly. So either taking notes while you're flying or just trying to remember things. That's why I do it directly after we fly, so that you're able to have the most information and the most recent, you're able to process everything with your instructor to learn the most from the flight. And a lot of instruction for me going through the upgrade, some of the best learning moments and references that I'll use later on with a future student have come from what the instructor says to me during that post-flight brief. Another part of that is doing the grade card, like I mentioned before, with the pre-flight brief with your instructor. An important part of having continuity in training and being able to be passed from one IP to another is having that grade card where each IP can go in and look at what a student's doing and have background on how that student's doing, what they might be struggling with. So you usually talk through your grade card as well with your instructor so that you're on the same page about what you're struggling with, what you're doing well with, and what you need to focus on going on from there. That brief specifically, Lauren on the left is the instructor pilot. I'm the student on the right, but those flights that we were flying that day are PIT, which is pilot instructor training. I'm learning how to become an instructor, so I'm pretending to be the instructor in those flights. So we were talking about her as the student, pretending to be a student, what mistakes she was making, how I was analyzing those in the flight, how she could have fixed that, and how I intervened, and how I could improve in future flights about intervening sooner or giving her more direct advice in the flight, just to develop how I instruct.
Fascinating. So my question is, as POC in the ROTC program, some POC find it difficult to ream into cadets who are messing up, who are younger, because I mean, on paper, you are similar, you're cadets. Do you guys ever have that problem or experience that kind of issue?
I think like if I'm flying with a student who's like not doing very well, to a point where like they don't understand like what's unsafe or something like along those lines, I think laying out kind of like the situation as a whole and like what could have happened, like if the IP like hadn't been there or intervened, I think is like more impactful than I guess being like demeaning towards them or like being mean or rude, like kind of putting them in a situation like or a scenario that shows them like what could have happened is like, at least when I was a student, like learning to be an instructor, like, okay, like I realized the scale of like what this could have been. And like, that's more impactful than like, and I actually took something away from that debrief rather than like, oh, my IP was like so mean to me. Like, I didn't listen to anything.
Yeah, I would say that there's not a whole lot of reaming that goes on. It's more because when you're in the air, everyone's trying their hardest, right? There's just stuff happens. We're all just here trying to learn. Whereas I know, I'm sure with you guys and when we're up at the school, like there is reaming, but that's mostly for stuff that we kind of messed up because there was a lack of effort, if that makes sense. But when we're here, everybody's always giving their 100%. So we're not looking for an opportunity to kind of take a shot at any of the students. Like we're here to help them learn, and you just kind of have to find with each specific student their best learning technique. So if you need to be a little tougher with them, then maybe you do that. But some people don't respond well to that, if that makes sense.
Understood. All right. So now we're going to go into questions about the post-flight briefing. If there's any sort of questions, I throw it out to Zoom. Speak up via unmuting or text. All right. There's no questions about that. This concludes the Soaring School virtual demonstration. We have about 3 minutes left in our allotted time. So if there's any general questions that the cadet staff wants to ask, any sort of questions on Zoomland, please let it be known, and I'm sure we'll be able to get an answer for it. I could also, really quickly though, I could start this off. There was one question that I received before this. So how many academy cadets go through training, this kind of training, would you say? Like ballpark.
Oh, do you want to answer that? I have the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna steal it for just a second. Okay. See, this is Lieutenant Colonel Cameron. I get to wear sweats to work. Isn't that awesome? All right. So Luke, you had asked me this, so I actually have numbers for you. Last year, we had 67 cadets who became instructor pilots through the 461 program, what Lizzie's in. We had over the summer in the 251 program, which one of your cadets sounds like is going to attend, 375 students. So we have 3 sessions of that in the summer. He'll get a program that's 14 sorties, 14 flights, and the intention is that he'll solo at the end of that. So that's what that program is.
It's changed 18 now, right?
You can go up to 18. If
Oh,
you need it to
up to
slow.
18, up to 18. So even more. And then that same program, which is called 251 to solo, during the academic year, 250 cadets participate in that. Does that help out?
Yes, ma'am. That works outstanding. All right. So now if there's no further questions, I'll wait around for about a minute more. If there's any questions for either Lieutenant Colonel Cameron or the cadet instructors panel, then please let it be known.
Cadet Guffey again. You mentioned that you're out at the field for like the entire day. Are there going to be days where you do multiple flights in a day, or is it always just one flight per day?
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, yeah.
You probably won't be out there all day. It'll be more like a half day type of deal, or a third of the day. But yeah, normally every time you fly 2 flights. So you'll fly 1 flight and then kind of talk about it, and then go fly another one, and then get a real in-depth debrief. And then sometimes you'll fly multiple of those in a day.
Yeah.
So you're never probably just going to fly 1 flight. It'll always be 2 or more.
It's like we run a schedule, and like you'll be on the schedule maybe twice for your flight period, like a day. And each time you're scheduled, you'll fly 2 flights. So you'll fly like 4-ish times a day.
Depending on the weather.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
and
weather's
then
not great here, so.
is the rest of the day filled with like classroom sessions, or how does that work?
We just go back to the dorms, like when you're done for the fly day, like we'll debrief as a squad, and then we'll send that flight period back to the hill, and then you have like the rest of the day to yourself. And,
But-
like
Sorry.
during the summer, we'll do like volleyball and stuff like as a squad, and like get food and do other different events. So it's like you do whatever you want.
But also when you're down here and you're not flying, you're doing ground duties, which is like the wing runner guy and the rope runner guy that we saw. And then you're helping push planes off our landing surfaces and stuff like that. So it's not like
You just sit there.
yeah, you're kind of you're kind of sitting, not just sitting there, but you're kind of just helping out for a lot of the time, and then you're flying for probably, I don't know, a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but some of the time as well. And then you'll leave. I don't know if that made sense, but okay.
Let me know if there are any more questions.
One final thing, Cadet Guffey again. One of you mentioned that you would be instructing over the summer. Is there any chance I could get like contact information? So if I have a question or something, I could reach out.
Yeah,
Also instructing during second period.
sure.
These guys will be here when you're here. I will not be.
Here, I'll say my phone number. You
Yeah.
ready?
Yeah.
All right, 757-585-8556.
Okay, so 757-58 what? 58556.
56. Yeah,
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
no problem.
Your social security number too.
Your credit card number?
Alrighty. Outstanding. If there isn't any more questions, then thank you so much for the USAFA cadets for coming. Thank you so much for Lieutenant Colonel Cameron for coming as well and helping me put this together. I felt it was very educational and will overall be a great addition and learning tool that the detachment can use. So that is a special thank you to, I'm going to read off the names just because I'm horrible with names. Cadet Instructor Pilot Jack Schultz, Cadet Lizzie Warner, and Cadet Instructor Rachel Eberhardt. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming out.
Thanks. Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Luke. Nice job.
Good afternoon, Colonel Cameron.
You can call me Aunt Colleen. It's cool. All right.
Absolutely.
Nice job, guys. All right.